Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Lashing Out Podcast and an Indie Sports Now Network. My name is Jared Berger, and I'm joined by my co-host, Kevin Quigley. Kevin, James Franklin's in the news this week for a weird reason. He's talking about airports, and he's talking about the State College Airport in particular. And the Penn State and Nittany Lions are flying out to Los Angeles and USC on Thursday. Or will, by the time this is posted, will have flown to USC on Thursday. But they have to travel about an hour and a half, 45 minutes south to Harrisburg because the runways at the State College Airport aren't large enough to handle the Boeing 787 that Penn State wants to fly on. Sure, busing 2 hours to then go 5 hours is not always ideal. Believe me, travel isn't fun. But when you're in the middle of central Pennsylvania, there's not much you can do. However, at the same time, as great as that might be for Penn State in the community, it might not make sense in the long run to have an extended runway in State College.
Yeah, I think having to go to Harrisburg, because the limitation before was maybe only Nebraska or Iowa. Those are two schools probably a little bit farther away. But if they were flying pretty much anywhere else in the Big Ten, they can take off from State College, land in State College with minimal amounts of fuel, and get there nonstop. The issue is with flying all the way to Los Angeles for either UCLA or USC, or flying out to Washington, or should they have a bowl on the West Coast, is that they can't have enough fuel in the aircraft to still take off on the runway in State College and get there without having to stop to refuel. When you are chartering flights, it's ideal to not have to stop for fuel, not have any layovers. That's why you charter flights. The added 90-minute drive to Harrisburg's not bad of a deal, except in the winter or late November, early December, when the college football playoff could have Penn State going to road games in the middle of winter. And I think that certainly is going to pose an issue. It can pose an issue because it's certainly a lot easier to drive 10 minutes to State College Airport than it is to drive 90 minutes down, I-80 to Harrisburg.
Maybe 322.
I usually never went that way out of Harrisburg. That's right, 322 over towards Hershey and whatnot. I went south on 99 to leave State College. So
I make the trip. I've made that trip so often lately for football. It's not fun, but yes, I can do it with my eyes closed.
But yeah, so the logistics of getting the State College runway extended, could it be a nightmare? Yes. Is it beneficial for the program? Also, yes, absolutely. It's a lot easier to get recruits in if you can land bigger aircraft. Maybe you can start adding more commercial stops out of State College, because right now it's pretty much Philadelphia, DC, Pittsburgh, and maybe Chicago. I think it's Chicago is the other one. So very limited. You miss your one flight out of State College for weather or what have you. Now you're making the 90-minute trip yourself because you missed your flight. Now you're trying to get a connection at Harrisburg. It's tough. Penn State is the only school in the Big Ten that has this problem.
But not the only school across the country that has no local, not necessarily, I wouldn't say local airport, but a big enough regional airport nearby. Because Alabama has the same problem. Tuscaloosa is in the middle of nowhere, Alabama. And I believe the closest airport might be somewhere near Birmingham or even not even in Alabama. So, I mean, there's options for Penn State. The problem is the cost. It's probably a $50 to $60 million upgrade to the airport to do that. To do that for Penn State football is dumb.
I mean, they're spending $700 million to renovate Beaver Stadium. What's another $60,000?
Now the problem is for the airport, they've got to get their money's worth. For Penn State to do that only a handful of times every year doesn't make the most financial sense. But you're right. Maybe they could bring some flights in. They would make it easier for other teams to fly in as well, coming from a Chicago or a Michigan or a USC or last week UCLA. And that's kind of the problem. The way that it was for UCLA, they could fly into State College, but they had to fly out of Harrisburg because of everything they were taking with them on the plane, the fuel, and all that fun stuff. This seems like sour grapes for Franklin, but this is, again, one of those situations for James Franklin. He has a reason for everything that he speaks. Everything that he says has something underlying behind it. He's mentioned that with the facilities. Guess what? The Lasch building got upgraded. Beaver Stadium got upgraded. Could they do this to the airport? Sure. And listen, he uses that airport probably as much as, if not more than anybody, solely because of the amount of travel that he does for the program, him and his coaching staff. Because you do have guys like Franklin that last week, for instance, Friday night, he flies by helicopter to Altoona, flies by helicopter to Martinsburg in the Altoona airport, which is significantly smaller than State College, flies from Altoona to the Altoona Martinsburg airport down to Harrisburg on a private jet, and then back to Altoona, and then helicopters back to State College. And it's really a weird situation, but it's also, it's only an extra 90 minutes. But again, I get his point, because he said you add that on to 2 hours roughly, you add between unloading and loading and whatever, and then you add that on to a 5-hour flight. Yeah, it's a lot. It is a lot, and it's not fun, right? You're going across time zones, yada, 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 cross country. But is it fiscally responsible in central PA to do that? I don't quite know. But
if the football program pays for it, yeah. Like, will the airport pay for it? I doubt it. But if Franklin wants it, they can bankroll it. I mean, it's 60 grand.
60 million. It's 50 to 60 million.
I thought you said 60,000.
No.
Sorry.
If it was 60,000, I think
60 million seems like a lot.
Yeah.
60 million seems like a lot.
If it was 50 to 60,000, I think James Franklin would have done it himself.
That's fair.
That's like $600 to us, I think. I don't know, something like that for him.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. It's just so. It's one of those catch-22s. Is it good for the program? Yeah. Is it good for everybody else? Probably not, because the other sports, really outside of hockey, probably don't have this problem.
How much is the national championship worth?
Right. And is the flight that gets you there that's going to be that? But this goes into what we talked about last week, right? When we talked about UCLA getting there on Friday rather than a day before. Penn State and James Franklin, they left and got there on Thursday. This is how in tune he is with every little thing about the program. Most coaches probably don't give a crap about where they fly out of. I'm going to be honest with you. As long as the flight's taken care of, they just got to show up, get on the plane, and go. That's what they probably are more inclined to understand and know and whatever. They have people that handle this for them. But this is how ingrained he is in this program. Every little minute detail that all adds up in that preparation and things like that.
I mean, they have a trip out west every year for the next 4 years.
At least one.
They have USC this year, I think UCLA, Washington, then again USC. That's a lot of travel. And if you're gearing up for a potential road playoff game, maybe down in Alabama, maybe in Texas, Arizona, not that they're going to make it, but like if you're trying to get to the outer skirts of the country, you're going to need the airport upgrades. And Franklin sees it as a 3-hour time loss. And when you're traveling and going the day before, kids have to miss class because they have the extra hour and a half on both ways. It takes you an extra hour and a half coming home on Sunday when you're just dog tired. It's worthy of the push, I think.
It'd be interesting to see how this goes. And that's why I wanted to talk about this in the first segment, because this isn't typically news, but Franklin's getting a lot of flack for mentioning this, because teams have to fly into State College. Teams have to do the same thing. And they've always had to. really. But again, it's fascinating to me because this is a guy that is in tune with everything in the surrounding area, and no matter what in the community or whatever. But this is something that's probably so minor that people really don't give much thought to it outside of when a coach like James Franklin mentions it.
I wonder if he's lobbying towards the Big Ten for it, because this is a concern that Penn State did bring up to the Big Ten. And because UCLA had to fly into one airport, leave from the other, they can show that it both inconveniences not only Penn State, but other teams coming in from the West Coast. And if we are going to go to a national conference like the Big Ten has become, maybe the Big Ten helps and ponies up half the cost.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it seems like it's definitely a chess move, but I mean, it's going to help Penn State in recruiting. It's going to help everything for Penn State, but they can kind of sell it as, oh yeah, this is also helping the teams getting in and leaving from the same airport. Because it can't be cheap to just take a 787 off, fly out of State College to land in Harrisburg empty, to then fuel it up and then go. And then bus the team down from Beaver Stadium to Harrisburg to then go back to UCLA. Like that's a logistical nightmare in and of itself.
Right. And I think that's the other thing too, is this is just another piece in James Franklin's chessboard, right? Coaching salaries, he mentioned years ago. Renovations. Got him at Beaver Stadium too. Fans showing out. Gets that. Whiteout energy gets that. And we've said this multiple times. When James Franklin says something, there is meaning and there's value behind it.
And there's usually something in the works behind it already.
Right. Yes, there are probably pieces moving. But this is also great for the university, I think, too. It could be. Because now, guess what? College visits are much easier. You want to fly from Chicago to Penn State, and people forget that Penn State isn't, and I don't know that people forget, but it's just not as mentioned, but Penn State is a national brand as far as education is concerned, not just football or athletics, but education. It's one of the top universities in the country. And, getting people from LA to come there or Chicago to come there is much easier when you don't have to drive 3 hours from Pittsburgh or an hour and 35 minutes from Harrisburg or 3 hours from Philly. Now it's a nice quick flight. Like for us in Altoona, my wife and I are going to Dallas here in a couple of weeks. We can't fly out of Altoona or fly out of State College or wherever to go down to Dallas. We have to drive to Pittsburgh and then down. So, I mean, obviously that's an inconvenience for us, but we're not hauling 100 people on a flight with football equipment and God knows what else is on that plane.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I can fly out of Richmond, but I occasionally just choose to drive the 2 hours to DC. So, yeah, it's not pleasant having to do the extra drives.
But we're going to drive right into the next segment once we come back from this break for the Lasching Out Podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. The hell?
Pens are getting their ass kicked right now.
Welcome back to the second segment of the Lasching Out Podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. I'm Jared. He's Kevin. Kevin, Penn State's off to USC. And going into last week, this was going to be a premier matchup. All USC had to do was beat Minnesota in Minnesota, and they didn't do it. It went from a top 10 potential matchup to USC's out of the top 25. Sam Darnold is running them out of the tunnel. And Penn State's a top 4 team. So how much can change over the course of a week? We talked about this on the last episode. All Penn State has to do is win. But this game, the magnitude that it could have been is so much more lessened now because of USC's loss. And for me, what USC team is Penn State going to get?
I think from our perspective, from the media perspective, from TV coverage perspective, USC's unranked. But the messaging inside the program better be, That's a top 10 team that we're playing. The preparation, everything that they've done leading up to the USC game is they are not playing some unranked team. They are playing a very capable team who can both run and pass the ball, and they can't be taken lightly. And if you show up just expecting to win, like Penn State could get their teeth kicked in here. But you also look at what Michigan did. I think Michigan threw for 32 passing yards and ran the ball for 290 and was able to beat USC in a very close game. Penn State's offense is obviously way more than complete than 32 passing yards in a game. So, yeah, the USC team that Penn State's going to get might be the unknown, but Penn State needs to prepare for them as if they are that number 10, number 12 team in the country who is fighting for the number 12 playoff spot, who is fighting to get in on the back end of the playoff. And that's how they need to prepare for the game. This is a de facto playoff game in the 7th week of the season.
Exactly. And I think that's the biggest thing is obviously James Franklin has a great, strategy. It's the 1-0 mentality, right? Every game was the same. It got him into trouble when he said that beating Pitt was just like beating Akron. And both Pitt and Penn State are both undefeated. Kudos to them. But it's just one of those games where there is a little bit more of a magnitude here. I mean, these are two blue blood programs going at it. You don't really see. The last time you saw this matchup was in the Rose Bowl. It's the first time I think they played a neutral site game since the 80s. They're not neutral site, but on campus site. And that's the beauty of these cross-country conference games now. But again, just got to be able to handle business. The recipe to beat USC is out. Minnesota did it by running the football. Michigan did it by running the football. Penn State can certainly run the football with Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton, who is going to be available. So it looks like Penn State could, on paper, theoretically, do really, really well against USC. Now, where that also comes in hand, where this game is a little bit of a different magnitude, is they can't afford to lose it now. If USC is a top 10 team and you're one loss and you lose to USC, a top 10 team, okay, it's a little different. Now you're losing to an unranked USC team. It's much like years prior where it's you lose to Michigan and Ohio State. Okay, well, you're 10-2 and your 2 losses are to Michigan and Ohio State. You're still going to go to New Year's 6 game. Well, now a loss to unranked USC and a loss to, hypothetically, Ohio State. Now that looks far less ideal on a resume.
This reminds me of what year was it where Penn State climbed to number 2 in the rankings. I want to say it might have been 2022. And you kind of just needed that validation that is Penn State the number 2 team in the country. And that year, they proved not to be. They need to prove now that in 2024, you have a 3-4 matchup at Iowa in 2021. That was kind of, I thought they got to number 2, but they were number 3. That was the matchup of they go on the road game to Iowa. Do they deserve the ranking that they have? If you go and lose to the unranked USC, you might as well just watch Penn State plummet in the rankings because they haven't looked dominant on the score sheet, which is all the AP poll is going to look at. They're not really watching every game. They don't have the capability of watching all 25 games, so it's kind of just going off of reputation. The score sheet for 2024 hasn't looked phenomenal. And if you go across the country and you lose USC, who is unranked, they're number 4 right now. It wouldn't surprise me if they're in the 15 to 20 range with everything that's going on. And it's because that's all that's going to say is they can only win at home and they can only win by the skin of their teeth. And the second you put them on the airplane and put them on a road game, especially if they got to go out of time zone, it's going to be ugly. Big Ten teams are 1-8 this season when they have to travel 2 or more time zones. Now, that includes USC losing twice, Michigan and Minnesota, and that includes UCLA coming all the way across the country to play Penn State last week. So You kind of have some underperforming teams, the lower halves of the teams who have had to travel more than 2 time zones. But how much of a challenge does that pose? So it's just not a game that they can take lightly. And with Nick Singleton, it sounds like he was pretty much all but ready to go last week. James Franklin said he was very close to playing, which means if it was a big game, he's probably playing. Excuse me. Now you have that big game. Now you have that extra week of rest. And USC is just going to have to deal with the two-headed monster.
No, I think you're absolutely right there. And I think that's the biggest thing is now this game, while the magnitude has changed as far as the rankings go, for Penn State, this is a prove it moment. This is, can you beat? I mean, there's still USC is still a really good 2-loss team. Can you go into the Coliseum, which is not an easy place to play? You're going to have a lot of Penn State fans at the game, I'm sure. Can you go in and handle business? And that's something that under James Franklin in ranked matchups, they have not. Now, is USC at the same caliber as Ohio State and some of those Michigan teams of late? Probably not. But, again, this is a prove-it moment because guess what? It doesn't get any easier for Penn State. They're at Camp Randall next week, and then they get a bye, and then they've got Ohio State. It's not an easy slate by any means, but this is the first prove-it moment. I guess second prove-it moment, right? They beat West Virginia. Everybody thought that was going to be a lot closer than what it was. We go in, they handle business in Morgantown. This isn't a bus trip. This is a cross-country flight. Go handle business at USC. Show that you can do it, and then get ready for a tough battle in Wisconsin. And I know the record isn't where it should be for Wisconsin or where it typically has been. But again, Camp Randall is not an easy place to play. So go take care of business and go from there.
Yeah. Penn State's got to take care of their business on Saturday, and we got to take care of our business right now. This episode is brought to you by Good Dog Beverage Company. Good Dog offers a variety of products, including zero carb, zero sugar, vodka cocktails, and bourbon hard seltzers. Also, whiskey cocktails that only have 3 grams of carbs and 3 grams of sugar. Through Good Dog's Leverage the Beverage program, they donate a portion of the profits from every case sold and 100% of the merchandise sales profits to provide service dogs for people in need. You can go to gooddogbeverage.com. That's good, D-O-G-G, beverage.com to find merchandise and the closest retailer carrying Good Dog beverages to you.
Well done, Kevin.
Thank you. So, yes, Penn State handling business at USC. USC has a very competent offense. Does Penn State's defense travel? Miller Moss shows that he can throw for nearly 300 yards. They've shown that they can run for 200 yards in a game. They haven't put both of those on paper, but the USC offense against both Minnesota and Michigan averaged about 370 yards. Penn State is the 4th total defense in the country and have been absolutely lights out in the second half, apart from when the second stringers go in. Like, starters on defense have probably allowed less than 150 yards in the second half all year long.
Mm-hmm.
Does that performance happen against USC? And if it does, I don't think Penn State fans have to worry about this game if that's the defense that comes. But also don't be surprised if Miller Moss throws for 120, 150 yards in the first half and they have 85, 90 yards of rushing on the ground, because that is also something that USC's offense can do. Noon start for them. That's prime for them. Penn State starting at 3:30 after a 6-hour travel and some jet lag.
I mean, the good news for Penn State is they got in on Thursday, practice at SoFi Stadium on Friday, a walkthrough, so they're going to be adjusted. For Penn State, you just got to go handle business. And I know that we said that was the title of the last episode, just keep winning. Well, that's what they have to do against USC. And to do that, you feed Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, and you throw in some Drew Aller passes and maybe even some Tyler Warren runs as well. I would love to see Tyler Warren out as a fullback on a couple of these Katron Allen or Nick Singleton runs, just bulldozing people. That would be pretty fun to me. A little bit of bully ball. But for me, for Penn State, they've got to go out and take care of business. And I think that they can. And again, like I started this segment off, what Penn State or what USC team are you going to get? Are you going to get one that's pissed off that they lost to Minnesota? You would think that they would be pissed off they lost to Minnesota. Or are they going to be dysfunctional because they lost to Minnesota, and now essentially their season is nearly all the goals that they had is nearly out of reach.
Yeah, if USC puts a third loss on the table, that's probably it for them. I want to see a Penn State team out and motivated to score 35 points. Minimum 35 points. I don't know if they will, but I want a team out there to score. I want a defense motivated to not be lackadaisical on the first or second drive of the game, be cutthroat from the start, be fairly well adjusted to the speed of USC. Maybe they give up 2 or 3 first downs on the first drive, but I don't want to see the 50 or 60 yard drive, field goal attempt, or even worse, a touchdown given up. I want to see a good competitive first drive for the defense and offense. You got to get at least 2 or 3 first downs on your first drive as well. Go out, be ready to execute, and be ready to put some points on the board and make a statement. It's time for a scoreboard statement game.
It has to be. It has to be dominant defensively and dominant offensively. That's what you need. Again, on paper, this is an unranked USC team. They're probably the best 2-loss team that you're going to face this year, but you got to go handle business. And we're going to handle business in the third and final segment when we come back for this break on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Welcome back to the third and final segment of the Lasching Out Podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Kevin, let's get into some predictions. What have you got?
Sure, the weather in LA is going to be gorgeous. Penn State's a 4.5-point favorite. Yeah, 76 degrees, partly cloudy. Typical LA day. Penn State's 4.5-point favorite. Over/under is 50.5. I don't think Penn State hits the 35-point threshold, but I think the offense looks good, looks productive. It might be close early, but I think Penn State's going to pull it out by 2 scores. I think it's going to be 31-17. They're going to be out to prove themselves. Yes, USC is a good team, but I think Penn State at least by 10 points up into the 14-point range for me.
I'm going to go out. This is pretty outlandish. I've had Penn State scoring 30 in every game, so I'm going to keep that streak up. I'm going to say they get to 34, and I think it's going to be 34-13.
That's a big spread.
I like Penn State to throttle them. This is going to be the best defense, really, that USC has faced, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think that Penn State's rushing attack is going to be too much.
Yeah. I think the only thing that'll hamper Penn State's scoring is if they do get that ground and pound drive where it's 3, 4, 5 yards a carry and they take 8.5 minutes off the clock like they did against UCLA last week to end in the first quarter into the second quarter, I think is when they did that. So yeah, I think that's the only thing is if Penn State really shortens this game, but get out early, control the game, and then just toy with them.
Yeah. That's what they need to do. But Kevin, this is far from the only game. We thought last week was going to be a pretty dull week, and I don't know that we've ever been so wrong.
I've been plenty wrong, but I think you're right. Utah, Arizona State, Friday night, 10:30 p.m. I don't know if I'll be awake for that one, but we do get a little ranked team action on Friday night. Hopefully, Cam Rising's healthy for Utah. Arizona State's 4-1, starting the year off pretty strong. Don't know who they've played, but strong record at least. So could be a tough road test in Tempe for the Utes.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, I think, a lot of places. But for Penn State, again, you just got to handle business. But there's so much that can happen. Right in front of them is not USC, but Ohio State and Oregon, a battle for not just Big Ten supremacy, but national supremacy. Penn State is number 4 in the AP poll. They are numbers 5 in the coaches poll. But Ohio State and Oregon, 2 and 3 in both. So this is a perfect opportunity for them to just see what happens. And I think, when you look at it like that, it's pretty wild. And I think that's the crazy thing, because, again, there's just so much that's going on right in front of their eyes. That's obviously going to be a 7:30 p.m. game, a primetime game on Peacock and NBC. But Ohio State's got to go on the road to Oregon. That's not going to be an easy game there in Eugene.
53.5 point total for that game. That seems like a lot.
Right?
That seems like a lot to me. I think if I was a gambling man, I think I'm slamming the under on that one because I hate football and I hate scoring. But neither of those offenses are particularly prolific. Oregon's not really played a defense yet, and they've struggled to score points and struggled to beat teams. Ohio State struggled to put points on the board against Iowa. Oregon's defense isn't Iowa's, but I think it could be very much a one-sided scoring affair in that game. It's only a 3-point game, but I think Ohio State's another one of those teams that can probably win by 2 to 3 possessions easily against Oregon. And we're going to see, is Dylan Gabriel for real on 7:30 on Saturday night? We're going to find that out.
Same thing with Will Howard.
Yeah. But I mean, Will Howard, Oregon defense, like that's not the matchup. Dylan Gabriel against a real Big Ten defense because he's been living in the Big 12. This is a big test for him. So other big test also in the 7:30 game, Ole Miss LSU.
Yes.
On the road in Baton Rouge.
That's right. Death Valley.
I do not envy Ole Miss.
No. I don't either. Another game that I'm looking at too is Texas and Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry. Because it can't be a shootout anymore.
There's something about Texas playing the same time as Penn State, and I never get to watch them. Yeah. Texas is another one of those programs that I don't root for, or actively root against. But I'm kind of invested in them this year.
That game is at the Cotton Bowl, as it always is, and you've got Alabama against South Carolina at noon in Tuscaloosa. It's really weird to see Alabama play a noon game. I'm going to be honest. That's 11 local.
They lose that.
That's bizarre.
They lose that CBS spot.
Right. But yeah, I mean that's a game to watch too. How does Alabama respond to getting beat by Vanderbilt? The Big 12 is a wild ride. Game day is in Provo, Utah for BYU, which is awesome.
And my boy,
you got that. Oh, yeah, they're playing your team. They're playing your squad, man.
The other game I'm looking out for is a team that lost last week versus a team who we don't know if they're actually good or not. The California Bears and the Pitt Panthers. I did ask the question on Sunday, is Pitt actually good? Cal's got a little bit of a squad going. Do have that long flight, but 3:30
-3.
3:30 kick for a Cal, which will help them.
And then you've got Notre Dame and Stanford.
They don't have to play that 9 a.m. body clock time for Cal.
Well, there's that too. You've got Clemson and Wake Forest in the ACC. That game's at noon too. But yeah, it's a great slate of football. Penn State obviously kicks off at 3:30. I will be tuning in a little bit late. I am going to be covering St. Francis and Duquesne at St. Francis. So I'm very thrilled to be doing that.
The nightcap is Kansas State, Colorado in Boulder.
Yeah, I just can't get into Colorado anymore.
I'm in it. I'm in it for the story. Good, bad, or indifferent. I'm in it for the story. I'm invested.
It is fascinating to see kind of how Prime does with everything. Now my squad, we mentioned this before. Boise State is at Hawaii at 11 p.m. That's going to be a late night. But Boise State up to number 17 in the country. That's going to be on CBS Sports Network. That's the good stuff.
How awesome would it be if the first year of the at-large bid and Boise State's undefeated in the top 10? Because then if you're number 12,
highest ranked group of 5, yeah.
If you're number 12, you're not. if you're number 12 or 13, you're rooting for Boise State to be in the top 12.
Yes.
And looking at their schedule,
They should be.
They'd have to mightily mess up.
They've got the best running back in the country, Ashton Ginty.
Yeah, what was that stat you sent me earlier today? 8.8 yards a carry.
He's averaging 8.9 yards a carry with 8 or more guys in the box, which is an insane statistic.
That's just, and he's not played in 3 second halves out of 5 games. Just, oh man, what a stat! What a performance!
Be very interesting to see if he could take down Barry Sanders' single season rushing record.
Do you know what that number is off the top of your head?
2450, I think.
All right, it's achievable. He might have to play some second halves to get it done, but
well, not if he puts up 220 in the first half.
Fair.
Any parting shots before we go, Kevin?
I'm good. I'm burning through all my vacation at work now, so got my good work-life balance going on. Big relief going on. My other house is on the market today. Like, I'm in a good mood. Golf season's like right prime golf weather's going on. We'll see what the weekend brings. I'm sure I'll have a shot at Pitt when they lose to Cal.
Well, there's that. The Calgorithm might like to have a word with you, Kevin. For Kevin Quigley, this has been Jared Prugar on the Lasching Out Podcast on the Sports Now Network. We'll catch you again next week.